Arsenal X has video records from the NightStalker's various cameras of one of its most incredible battles ever. The video is recorded to have been taken around 1943, somewhere in the middle of summer. At that time, Arsenal X was already working on a 10 megapixel Neuralink optic feedback system that would allow for artificial sight for sensors and vehicles. The sensors for the NightStalker have 17 visual pigments compared to the human's 3 visual pigments. This means that it is able to see in almost every detectable possible range of visual feedback there is, and with its specialized sensor eyes as well, its literal 10,000 eyes across its body are able to form a complete 360-degree view around its body, being able to see anything and everything. It has no blind spot. Its 2 visual front sensor eyes are capable of seeing an incredible 600 megapixel crisp resolution visual input for the optic sensors of the NightStalker. All the other eyes are around 300 megapixel, but are still way more than enough that is needed for wartime use. The human eye is only capable of 576 megapixel resolution. Remember, the NightStalker is a living and terrifying beast of horrifying biotechnic proportions. Even though Arsenal X created the NightStalker, they are more confused than they are knowledgeable about it. The NightStalker leaves them with more questions than answers. It is like a runaway virus that continues to evolve faster than people can catch it. Because the NightStalker is able to feel through its skin and armor, as well as internal influence, it is able to move its body in very fluid-like motions, showing its incredible grace and beauty in the air. When not being used for death in wartime, the NightStalker is oddly beautiful and awe-inspiring with its capabilities and maneuverability. The NightStalker was visiting one of the bases that the Allies had, and it was busy doing reconnaissance for them, in return for them giving it food and resources to regenerate. This was during one of its many escapades, dropping off the radar, resulting in Arsenal X growing extremely concerned about what it was doing. In fact, the NightStalker was busy helping the Allies, but it knew that it had to do so secretly, so that way it would not be found out, even by Arsenal X. It had contacted the Allied base that was working on top-secret enhancements for their new FMK-24 Spitfires, including better cannon placement and much more powerful engines. The NightStalker actually wired them schematics to make a more effective engine. And a few months before, and it was there to see how these new engines performed. The NightStalker was showing a side of itself that it had never shown before, and proved to be a very valuable asset to the Allies later on in the war. Because of its secretive mission in working with top Allied science and research and development individuals, this allowed them to make a more powerful and effective engine for the FMK-24 Spitfires. The NightStalker had already proven itself by reaching his speed of Mach 1.2 with ease, and was able to catch up with Allied Spitfires to see how well they function, and due to its ability to upload information, it was able to find ways to enhance their engines and make them better warplanes. So, it would fly alongside test flights of the new and improved engines of the advanced Spitfires, and even saw it in action outperforming and outmaneuvering, and even cutting down enemies with astronomical effectiveness. But because Arsenal X found out about this later, all records of this were reluctantly scrubbed, but kept in safe storage for further use. All planes with this advanced engine were sealed away, so that way they could be kept secret until later on. By this time, the NightStalker was able to completely self-load and regenerate from battle in case it suffered damage or low ammunition. It was rudimentary, but it was very effective nevertheless, and the Allies were astonished by its abilities. It had basic intelligence and was able to discern targets from Allies and who the friends and foes were. It was able to understand basic orders and able to put two and two together and show reasoning skills, but still rudimentary and more basic. But for 1943, it was beyond anything that anyone could have ever imagined, and its capabilities proved that in spades. It was still the apex predator and proved to be unbeatable in nearly every mission that it worked on. During its day at around 0600, the base came under attack by about 73 enemies. It was a combination of bombers and fighter bombers and a few escort fighters with only 2 minutes before escort fighters. With only 2 minutes before the enemy got there, the NightStalker, with its advanced radar and systems, launched itself at full speed without its pilot in the cockpit. Because this base did not yet have radar on it, it was reliant on the early warning systems that have missed the large squadron of the enemy bombers due to a hole in the defense network. Records later showed that it had been knocked out, and they were busy trying to get it back up and running. This meant that the NightStalker was the only one that could actually tell when the enemy was coming, and it was jostled out of its slumber by its early warning system, frantically beeping, letting them know of enemies coming to attack. As the NightStalker's pilot ran out of his tent, he saw the NightStalker take off with ferocious speed and vigor, hell-bent on spreading as much blood as possible. Usually the NightStalker is an incredibly stealthy aircraft. Stealthy aircraft with quiet engines, but the NightStalker knew that it had to put everything into its engines and weaponry and to not focus on a stealth attack. So, as the NightStalker ferociously sped down the runway, picking up speed insanely quick, the roar of its engines could be heard, and the entire base shook with the reverberations of its powerful engines. It was said that during this time, this plane looked very similar to the SR-71 Blackbird and boasted a terrifyingly abyssal black, bulky, and powerful and imposing body. The NightStalker then shot straight into the air almost instantly, using its specialized hypercore drive and hyperjet engines to rage toward the enemy. It let loose a screech of otherworldly proportions as it screamed its battle cry, firing its front-facing cannons. Remember, these are hyper cannons, guys. These things can fire at almost 3,000, 4,000 feet per second. So these things are able to have incredible range. And yeah, it's just, these things are incredibly powerful cannons. As the base was shaken awake by the screech of the plane, they realized that they were under attack, and all the alarms on the base quickly sounded as people went to the battle stations and anti-air installations. The lights of the base turned on as pilots quickly scrambled to the planes, frantically trying to get their engines started and on the runway before they were bombed. Suddenly, along the abyssal black body of the NightStalker, red veins and wirings bristled from its body as it gained another level of sentience, and was able to track all the enemy fighters at once with its powerful processing ability and advanced radar. During this time, guys, the NightStalker was already working on a massive enhancement and did not have the processing power before to do all this. So it was busy doing things piece by piece until it could put together its entire network and therefore greatly enhance its processing power and cognitive ability. And luckily, by this time, it had just finished this, so it was able to finally use its new sentience and unlocked level of intelligence to use in wartime. The distant, thunderous roar of the cannons of the NightStalker tore into the enemy battle group with terrifying efficiency as the self-steering bullets and supernaturally enhanced cannons ripped into planes left and right. It let loose a powerful screech and fired an energy charge into the air, causing an electromagnetic pulse, disrupting the engines of all surrounding planes within a 2-mile radius, making their engines 40% less effective and slowing them down. This bought the Ally base valuable time to get some of their planes up before the enemy reached them. Immediately, the NightStalker did a corkscrew, flinging hundreds of explosive charges from its body into the surrounding aircraft that were trying to attack it and prevent it from stopping them from attacking the base. Suddenly, explosions lit up the early morning sky as 15 planes suddenly erupted into flame as the charges exploded. The enraged NightStalker was trying to focus on the bombers first, so that way less damage would be done to the base. Because of the advanced reasoning skills of the NightStalker, it was able to fly by the bombers, depositing its explosives while using its frontal hypercannons to pepper the enemy fighter craft and break up strike groups. So, imagine these are the enemy bombers. You know, these are the big enemy bombers here. So what's going on is that the NightStalker in red is flying this direction, and you know, and peppering the. No, sorry. Let's do this again. It's flying this direction, and then, as it is, launching its corkscrew of death, there are enemy fighter craft coming this direction. And these are the other bad guys that are trying to come after it. So while it is spinning its body around, making a whole bunch of like red death around it, all these little dots are the little kind of bombs that it launches from its body, it would be firing its high-speed cannon shells into the enemy fighter craft because it had both short-range and long-range attack abilities. This was before the NightStalker was equipped with missiles, so it had to focus only on cannons and explosive launchers, but this proved to be more than enough for it. So, yeah, kind of cool. Let's see. It then let loose another terrifying shriek of supernatural proportions, reverberating in the eardrums of the enemy pilots, causing them to double over in pain, making their flight patterns erratic and uncontrollable. This also bought the Allies some more time as more planes were on the runway about ready to take off. Luckily, the Allied base already had a lot of their planes ready to go. They just had to have their engines turned on and be taxied onto the runway. Anti-aircraft fire and flat cannon fire started to pepper the skies in bright explosions and black puffs of smoke. The NightStalker knew the strong points and the weak points of the Allied defenses of the base, so it worked on covering the weak points and chasing enemy planes into the areas where the defenses were strongest, so that way they would be shot down. The NightStalker was very quick in being able to get behind enemy planes and firing a few well-placed rounds into the bodies of the plane, causing them to erupt from inside out. Its powerful engines roared like thunder, and its cannons flashed like lightning as the hypervelocity shells tore into the enemy. Because of the immense power of the hypercannons of the NightStalker, it looks like lightning being shot from the cannons. That is how powerful these cannons are. They get to the enemy target almost instantaneously because of the immense power of these weapons. And so you can only imagine 80 years later how much more powerful the NightStalker is. The troops on the ground marveled at the incredible maneuverability and speed of the NightStalker, and sighed a breath of relief, thankful that the NightStalker was their friend and not their enemy. They could hear the powerful cannons and explosive emitters sounding through the air. Suddenly, another 15 planes erupted into chaotic explosions as one of the bombers flying overhead of the others was destroyed, dropping its armed bombs, or payload, onto the bombers below. It caused a horrifying chain reaction of shrapnel and explosives to take out numerous others. The NightStalker had taken out 30 planes within the first few minutes and was about ready to go for its next killing run, as it strafed enemy planes, ripping apart pilots in their cockpits as the planes fell toward the ground in a sickening display of psychotic killing. By this time, the Allied base had gotten a small squadron of fighters up into the air, and were working on trying to give cover fire to the NightStalker as it continued to ravage enemy planes. By this time, the NightStalker had suffered multiple hits to its body, but its advanced armor protected it from damage, and most of the shots just pinged off the armor, or left very tiny dents. Every shot that connected with the NightStalker's body enraged it even more and enhanced its bloodlust. The NightStalker was going to leave no survivors, and the enemy was already starting to think about retreating due to seeing entire clouds of their own people being obliterated in quick succession. Because of the NightStalker, the Allied base had enough time to mobilize and be able to defend itself better against the enemy attack. Bombs were still dropped on it, and people were hurt, but luckily no lives were lost on the Allied side, due to the NightStalker being able to target the bombers first, making the strafing runs of the enemy much less effective. Multiple Allied personnel were, however, injured, and some did suffer even grievous injuries, but by the grace of the great Creator, no one died. A sickening 2 more minutes passed as more Allied planes took to the sky. The Allies even took their own bombers into the sky as well to serve as mobile gun platforms to help cull the enemy and provide support for the NightStalker that was already under fire by 15 fighters. The NightStalker continued to do amazing acrobatics in the sky with its powerful vectoring engines, providing insanely effective in being able to keep itself in the air even while doing maneuvers that would normally stall a plane. 5 more minutes passed as the enemy force was now cut down to 20 planes left as more Allied fighters took to the air. Terror-stricken and realizing that the battle was lost, the last few remaining planes turned to try to retreat back to their base. Already in an enraged state and wanting more death, the NightStalker, wow, that's a bad typo. The NightStalker quickly took off after them with a small Allied squadron of FMK-24 Spitfires in pursuit, and these were the advanced ones. These ones could go a lot faster than the other ones. The Allies as well were not going to let the enemy get away, and because of the specialized turboprop engines of these new planes, they could reach a speed of almost 530 miles per hour because of the insight from Arsenal X, specifically the NightStalker. This allowed them to have a high cruising speed with lower fuel consumption and better power. Within 90 seconds, the NightStalker had flown past the fleeing fighters and intercepted them, cutting down 2 more, causing the others to scramble and break off. This allowed the modified FMK-24s to catch up and attack the fleeing fighters. The Allied pilots proceeded to shoot down 10 of the 18 remaining fighter craft. In a few more minutes, all but one heavily damaged fighter was left and was being chased and closed in on by the enraged NightStalker and Allied fighters. Suddenly, the NightStalker sent a vocal command to the rest of the Allies through the radio and ordered them to pull back and let the last fighter escape. This lone survivor would be a message of warning to the Axis powers that they were now about to get completely reamed by the full fury of the Allied powers and the hatred of the newly enraged Arsenal X conglomerate. Remember, the Axis powers really kind of ruined Arsenal X being the nice guys, and because of this, Arsenal X kind of lost hope in humanity and faith in humanity. So, seeing where the world was going and already having to suffer through World War I, Arsenal X was like, screw it, we're not being the nice guys anymore. The NightStalker, in a final grim act of evil cruelty, fired a single round from its left cannon, and it shot through the back of the enemy fighter and exploded, killing the rear seat pilot, covering the cockpit in blood, and the audible screams of the front pilot could be heard as he frantically wiped blood off of his windscreen. He immediately dove down low to the ground in an attempt to shake off the Allied strike group. The NightStalker and the Allied squadron turned about and went back home to recover and rearm. It was said that the story of the only surviving pilot of the enemy task force terrified the Axis powers, and they had to be extremely careful from that point on. They did not want to incur the wrath of the terrifying NightStalker again. The surviving pilot was found in his quarters a week later with a gunshot wound to his head. It was ruled that it was by suicide.